Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mind Refinery podcast, made by us, the Mind Refinery, creators of content, aggregators of popular culture, and the place where creatives go to thrive. I'm your host, Kyle Bodanis, and this week is our first look at our favorite films of the 2010s, starting with my personal favorite, The Social Network. Before we get into the show, just a little Mind Refinery news. Next week on the podcast, we're going to briefly dip back into the Star Wars universe with our discussion on the season finale of The Mandalorian. We wanted to give you a bit of a Star Wars break, so we held off on the show, but I feel like now it's a time to release it on an unsuspecting world. And if you're not already subscribing to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, please do so, and if you dig it, feel free to give us your finest reviews. And now, without further ado, here's the show. Here today to discuss my favorite film of the 2010s are Mind Refinery creatives Andrew Van Eyck.
Hello.
John Neal.
What's happening?
And Andrew Lanza.
Hey, hey.
So, first of all, this movie started a long-lasting love affair with my favorite mistress, and that's the Aaron Sorkin script. The dialogue, the cadence, the witticisms, the Sorkinisms, fantastic. You know, he took a movie that was about a guy who created something that changed the way, we interact with one another, and he himself had a complete inability to interact with people. And on a micro level made it Shakespearean. This isn't really a movie about Facebook. This is a movie about friends who are jealous and class and betrayal. And it's almost, and you have the Iago Shakespearean character in Sean Parker, who drives a wedge between the friends and is in the one friend's ear. And it tells a story of the modern world by telling a story that is of humanity
it's really no wonder, you thought Fincher and Sorkin decided to do this, and it's probably what inspired them. It's like, they probably jumped off the page. They're just like, holy shit, this story has everything already there, the elements in real life.
Yeah, and you know what? There is a quote by Fincher where he even says, he alludes to this idea of the small. He says, what happened was I can't remember the name of the writer. Boyan, look up who did the Accidental Billionaires. So the treatment for the book, The Accidental Billionaires, which it was based on, he got a copy of it because they wanted to do a buy-in. They wanted to do.
He would have.
Yeah, so they wanted, because what they wanted to do is they wanted to do a novel and movie release at the same time. So Sorkin got a copy of this treatment. And this is what he said about it. He's like, what attracted me to the film part of the project, had nothing to do with Facebook. The invention itself is as modern as it gets, but the story is as old as storytelling. The themes of friendship, loyalty, jealousy, class, and power. And
all there.
That's what I loved about this. And right from the opening scene, which I think the opening scene is one of my favorites, in film. First of all, it also introduced me to another love of mine, Rooney Mara, who is absolutely fantastic in that opening scene. And what I like about it is that opening scene really tells you everything you need to know about Mark Zuckerberg, the character Mark Zuckerberg, because there's a difference between necessarily the character and real Mark Zuckerberg. It really tells you everything about what all his idiosyncrasies and deficiencies are going to be moving forward.
How do you distinguish yourself? I mean, he says it in that first scene.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a really, really big theme of the movie is when everybody scored 1,500 on the SATs, and he's talking about
scored 1,500 on the SATs. He scored 1,600.
Sorry, excuse me. I don't know.
No one at this table.
Yeah, we're from Canada.
No one at this table scored a 1,500 SATs.
Anyway, but sorry, excuse me, 1,600, and so it's how do you distinguish yourself? And I think that was a really, really big theme of the movie, and it's everything, as you said, it was laid out in that first scene.
Yeah, I think that's where it all comes from, because the whole thing is about, even when they're talking about Facebook is cool right now and that's the best currency we have. That's the buzzword for him, is this idea of cool and this idea of acceptance. And although it does make sense for the business, it also mirrors him and what he needs in his life, and this always trying to get acceptance, this trying to separate himself from everybody. And that's especially for young people, that's an idea we can all kind of understand. I mean, just people in general.
I think you're big dialogue guy. So this movie is pretty much
I could full on beat off
It's-
to
you
Aaron
li-
Sorkin guy.
Trust me, Sorkin did enough of it himself.
Yeah,
he did.
It is
I
a
just,
little
you know
over the
what,
top at
like,
times.
and that is, that's especially if you've watched The West Wing a million times, then the Sorkinisms, like, how many times have you watched The West Wing?
No.
Okay, so you think you're picking up on it now? Watch The West Wing.
No, I've seen like the supercuts on YouTube of like the
But
Sorkinisms.
it's like
and
it's a non-stop just Sorkinism. The walk and talks. It's just you're motion sick by the end of it, and all I want to do is stuff it in my mouth over and over again. Feed it to me. I love it.
could not watch. I don't think.
No, I don't think you could.
I
If
think I could do
you're
it.
having an issue with the Sorkinisms, then The West Wing is not. Like I'm.
Trust me, I love the dialogue in Social Network, but there were a couple times where I was like, that's a little cringy.
So
like,
what for you are the cringy parts?
just like like sometimes I can't off
Like
the top of my
tripping
head.
over its own witticisms.
Yeah,
like
we're
kind of
just
like where they're trying to be too smart back and forth.
Yeah,
and
where he'll just like Zuckerberg will like Eisenhower as Zuckerberg will just say something like it's super witty, and it's just kind of like I don't know, it just doesn't land. Like I don't know.
Eisenhower,
Sorry, did I say Eisenhower? What did I
Yeah.
say?
the
Eisenberg.
Supreme Allied
Eisenberg.
Commander of
Yeah.
the Second
Wow.
World War.
Eisenhower.
That's I mean, I've been watching a lot of World War II documentaries lately.
This guy's been
You
watching.
don't-
This guy's been watching World War II in color. So now everyone is Eisenhower.
Yeah.
I actually think like the parts that
Dwight D.
the parts that I'm
Shout
kind of
outs.
see. This is the thing though. Even with those parts, even if you take those things out, I feel like it just wouldn't kind of all mesh the same way
And
in the context of
gives
the
it
movie.
a very,
In the
I don't
context of the
know.
movie,
this
like
is-
I
this
get what
is
you're
kind
saying.
of a-
I
this
get
is-
what you're saying.
this
too,
is
though.
kind of a-
shows his
yeah.
idiosyncrasies,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
like embedded into it.
It's part of the character.
And it's
of the
everybody
movie,
around
really.
him gets
I
dragged
guess.
into it, which is clearly
Yeah.
what
this
happened.
this is kind of the meta of the of this discussion is that where it goes from your favorite to what you like like for a critical analysis. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's failings, but I think it's at the same time critical darling. But like when you're critically analyzing it, I think I could definitely see that the Sorkin witticisms, and like how they can trip over each other, and especially when it's because you know what it is. It's sometimes it's forced, right? Is that it's not? It maybe doesn't belong in the scene.
I can think of a scene now. The one where he's looking out the window and the attorney at one of the depositions asks him if he has
I
his
love
attention.
this scene.
Yeah.
See that's
That's what
the,
you're
Wait, hold
choosing?
on. Sorry, I cut
think
you off.
that-
Explain.
Yeah,
the,
okay,
the
explain.
dialogue.
Sorry.
From a filmmaking standpoint, like I feel like that scene is edited like wonderfully. Like from a technical standpoint, I think it looks great. But I think the dialogue in that scene is like you have the bare minimum of my attention. I'm just
Yeah.
like okay.
I love
also-
it.
but see,
I
this
think
is-
that's one of the
dude
best
is on,
lines
like, that's such
in
a-
the movie.
See, this-
He's
I
to
just
anybody
so, like,
that
on
can't
this.
recall it. He's like,
Nobody edits Aaron Sorkin's poetry.
No, Fincher reined him in for that movie. Fincher
They had to. But you know what though? There was like it's the
Fincher reined him
it's
in.
funny
It would have
'cause when
been
you-
like
because
more
the-
Sorkin.
because no for sure that's why I think
maybe they
like,
struck a good balance. I
that-
love that. The push and pull is where you get the
just
best.
about to say just
Sorry,
exactly no actually you said it perfect. The idea about the push and pull, it's that you have someone like Fincher who is far more of a minimalist and who goes on who's looking to make things.
But I mean, he
more-
has a distinct visual style. I don't know if I'd call him a minimalist.
No, I'm talking-
on this set
I'm-
though. On this set, I know no setup. Like every setup was done in like 20 minutes.
But this is what I'm saying. It's not so much even from a visual, from an acting standpoint.
Okay, sorry,
right?
my
Like,
apologies.
Yeah. But no, but it's a good note about the visuals too, because we will absolutely get into that. Is that like those performances? He's not looking for talky things. You know what I mean? His stuff is more brooding. Although with that said, a movie like Fight Club, is talking. But I his stuff is more, especially when you look at like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah.
It's more, but Sorkin comes in and says, let's do these rehearsals and let's keep, let's time the dialogue so it has meter and cadence. And like when you put those two together, you end up getting something really, 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 really good.
Yeah.
And like, just like you said, it's like a push and pull kind of
There's
thing.
He shuts them all up in that. That scene is great. What is the last line when he's like, he says you have the bare minimum amount of my attention. And
That's
he's
all
like,
you deserve.
No,
or
and he
something.
goes, my head is back with my team, who are a
Doing
bunch of people
things that
doing
you are
things
not
that,
technically or creatively
Capable
capable
of
of
doing,
doing.
yeah.
Yes.
and then including, but especially your clients,
Yeah.
the people who are suing
yeah.
that can't do this thing. And it is such a really good point, because one of the strongest themes in this movie that you really got to look back at is like, what is intellectual property? So if like you can think of some idea,
That's a
what
very
does that
good
really
point, yeah.
mean? The guy that it like there's a new age. We're like redefining that. We could answer that question from like a hard idea and invention and product in the 80s, but in this space, we don't even know. Like obviously none of us are lawyers here, but even beyond that, even beyond the legal, like you just don't even understand where the idea starts and where the product is, which part is which.
Well, I like
it just blends in.
I'm not sure if it was that same scene, but he's like, if you were going to invent Facebook, you would have invented Facebook.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if that's the same scene, so I might be like going back on what I was saying.
No, but it's from the same like
But,
thread
like,
of Depositions.
But I did like that line.
They did a good job too of planting the different, like he's like borrowing ideas from his life, which is the same thing a writer does, which is the same thing anybody else does. And so it's like, did this guy rip off this idea or just encounter a bunch of stuff and then make it into something?
Yeah. Another thing I really, really liked about it was the setup and working them around the depositions, working like as being the framework for the
like the nonlinear.
Yeah, and I also I
structure.
love the way that they cut between them as well. Like going from one to the other, one finishing each other's sentences, because I mean it's that it's you see in documentary overlapping question. When you're asking people questions, you tend to overlap them so you can like mix their answers together, and they did that by using the questions in the deposition, which I thought were incredible. And also like you get some good performances in the deposition too. Rashida Jones is one of them. Like she's fantastic. She's fantastic in everything. But like, what did you guys think about the idea of structuring it around the deposition? Was that something good?
Drives the whole movie.
Loved it.
Pretty much.
You know what, that on the writing side, like to be able to, because it's got this common thread, but it's actually the two depositions and you don't even actually know when they're happening. Like the way it jumps around in time is one of the craziest. You don't even think of it, but in terms of like time and pacing, is one of the craziest editing jobs. And I'm not sure if it was all in the editing or all in the writing or both. The combination,
yeah,
probably
both.
But that's just wild and it's completely coherent, so much so that you don't even really notice it until the end of the movie, that it was jumping around in time.
But what I really liked was it did a really good job of allowing exposition to happen while still feeling natural and not like, hey, we're just talking facts at you. Like they let, like you got the situation, like you got like the event, and then you literally cut to them talking about the event and like seeing it, through the lens of the time that has passed, and also just like you get their instant feelings about it. They're like, I felt this about what you just saw. So I thought that was a really, really good way of like showing. I mean, it's not even it's telling, not showing, but it was done in a natural way. I thought effectively.
I mean, the exposition, like a situation with exposition. I mean, exposition can be used to completely beat a film over the head. And I think that the questioning and the scenes with the lawyers was a good way of dropping that in where it wasn't clumsy, because I mean that's really the difference between a complete professional and an amateur when it comes to writing, is like how are you injecting that exposition in, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like whereas someone like, for example, a completely different thing, but like J.J. Abrams, in his movies, dropping like the exposition.
Then
right
it's
there.
the terrible dialogue, be like describing what the person's doing.
And there's obviously that completely different types of filmmaker, but still, at the end of the day, you got to be pro with it, and you got to be, and you got to do it economically. And I thought it was really really good.
Another thing is by putting it in there, it really reinforces what all of this is about too, right? Like the movie. It's about
it centers the betrayal.
You think it's a character piece and betrayal, and it is all those things, but it's also about people suing each other in the business world, which is literally pretty much takes up 90% of the entire workforce of America's time.
Yeah,
Like,
but I think the suing, but I think
money.
I think the idea of betrayal like comes to the forefront because of who is suing him. Not referring to the Winkle vibe, but it's his it's his best friend who is played expertly by Andrew Garfield.
He really does this.
He's incredible,
job.
and we're gonna get into the performances, because I think that has to be talked about. But like before we get into that, I want to talk about where does this rank in terms of David Fincher works.
Yeah, I think it's his best movie. Personally, I think it's his best film. I mean,
I'm gonna pull up a list.
There, like Seven, I think was the front runner for me before I saw this movie.
Because of Gwyneth Paltrow's head in the box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking back, yes.
I would say this. I would say this was tops.
What about?
I think it's so significant too. That's like
Yeah,
like you have
yeah.
to. So it's impossible to separate it.
Zodiac was sick.
Zodiac was amazing.
Zodiac is slept
amazing.
on, and it's so good.
But it's a good movie. But like, what is the impact and what is the importance?
No,
So this
exactly. That's why I
movie
said it
is
was
like-
sick. I wasn't
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
Girl
like
with the Dragon
tops.
Tattoo. For like
Gone Girl was really good.
First of all,
Gone Girl's really
I
good.
love
Gone
that
Girl's
he
great.
used. Love that he used a super strong female. Did a story with a super strong female protagonist. The books. I mean, Vinny, you read the books. All those 3 of those books, the Millennium Trilogy.
Yeah,
I
that was a hard one for me because the books like just
they're
are-
good. Stieg
they're
Larsson's a great.
so good, and the movie. Even when I was watching the movie, because I was so excited for it, and then right as I walked in the theater, I just kind of realized that this is going to be hard to do.
I didn't get
There's
it.
no
it
way
was,
to do
it was a
justice.
movie about looking at pictures.
Yep.
Yeah, no. See, you
Not
could
into that?
That's
But
because,
I saw
dude,
the original too, and I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be like cyber espionage.
It's just not a. Some
I'm like,
movies
oh, they looked at
translate-
pictures.
Some books translate just so much better, and you think they were because there's all these exciting plot points and stuff like that. But if you read the books, you'd just be like, "This is a hard film to make." Like, there's
Yeah,
so much.
because that's one of the
there's
ones I
so
actually.
much depth in it.
I
and
didn't
just-
read like the Hornets.
You should read all of them. It ends
Yeah.
up the whole thing. It's
So
it's a
you know what I mean? Like
page turner.
for me, I really 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 love that. It also doubles down on all the amazing Fincher things.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna talk about the score to this, which is incredible. But I bringing bringing
I'm throwing it.
bringing Trent Reznor in again, incredible. I mean, and so like for me, that's kind of the one that rivals it. I also love Rooney Mara and think she's super talented. I think she just great casting. Really making the films less blatantly male as well, because he makes very like I guess masculine movies up until that point, up until this really. But if you're looking at Seven, if you're looking at Fight Club, I mean Fight Club 2 is another
this
one.
movie still is all just dude.
You know what? Honestly, it is too. You're
And
totally right, it is.
they put Rooney Mara in there, but then that's basically
She's only
like
really
a
in the
prop.
first scene, and she's like later on in the movie at the restaurant.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. This is a completely male.
And the
film.
ending,
Now that
which
we're
is
looking at it.
actually the most significant thing, because if her performance wasn't so strong, that ending wouldn't have been so strong. when
That's
he's
true.
just
And you know
like-
what they even talk about? I mean, because they're even talking about like the Harvard guys sending a bus around to pick up women and stuff.
Well, yeah, and he compares them to farm animals, and then it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it cuts to them like literally like being lined up and shit. So,
yeah.
but like I don't know if you guys
You know what? Actually, sorry, that is a good way to inject that in there, because the story is the actual real people we're talking about are all males, and then you need to have some female components. So instead of just like hacking it in there, like they actually they touch on some real issues and show how
yeah.
disgusting it is, that culture with these busloads of women trying to get into a thing and stuff like
And
that.
and then it also says something about his character that there is a jealousy for it, right?
Oh, he's definitely very jealous.
Well, it's the reason this whole thing got started in the first place, isn't it? He had a bad breakup and
How to distinguish yourself?
face smash. Boom.
So I really kind of want to talk about the visuals as well. Like, what do we guys think of this? I mean, like, we may be a little biased because we shot Red 1.
Was it Red 1 or was it just the red camera?
I think it might. Let's look that up. Like one thing I enjoyed about. I mean, I don't like the red look. Period. You know what I mean? But also at the same time, I feel that Fincher's movies are so well shot, and like the coloring in this movie is.
It was a little bit over the top.
I
a
loved
little,
it. I loved it. Why did you think it was over the top?
It was like, I don't know, like it was just like a little bit on the edges of the extreme for me. Like it was like a little bit too.
Which
Anyway,
extremes though?
Too
like-
saturated.
like yeah, too saturated. Like when he was in college, it was like super blue, and then when he's like super blue and green, and then when he's like in the depositions, it's like super orange. I don't know. I thought it was just a little bit over the top, but I still love the way it was shot.
I have an
With the-
affinity for that super high contrast David Fincher look.
I think maybe you're saying maybe they had to push those elements a little bit when they could have been just a little more adventurous with the shots themselves. Like it's pretty
It's vanilla.
rudimentary.
It's vanilla.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't
Well,
take any
it
risk,
was
and
like
maybe they didn't want to make the camera a character and whatever. And
Yep.
I respect that choice. It didn't need to. The story had so much, but yeah, maybe you could have. I don't know, had a low angle or something.
Red,
like that.
Red 1
Like,
MX, by the way.
It was a Red 1 MX.
Yeah.
Okay, so they just did the chip mod.
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
it.
that's
sorry
that.
for the film geeking.
Mysterion.
Yeah, you know what? And it's like obviously there's a bias towards it, but I think it's again like if you enjoy that Fincher visual style, I think he like really doubles down on it with this, and then he will triple and quadruple down on it on his next film, like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
What I love about David Fincher's visual look is he's always the camera's always moving, right, and he always follows his actors. Like if someone's standing up, he'll pan up. He won't let them leave frame or whatever. He'll actually follow them. And or like walking across the room, sitting down, the whole motion will be perfect and stuff like that. This film felt like there was a lot more quick editing happening because you're jumping, like around a lot, right? Like and like a lot of inserts in this movie. Like he comes into his apartment, opens the fridge, there's an insert for the fridge bottle
with the beer bottles.
Yeah, like there's just so much of that happening to move it along so fast. But
and I think that previously before this, there wasn't a lot of like him and Jeff Cronenworth. Like really doing what, like for example, Roger Deakins does, where the camera is moving and there's a lot of movement. Whereas like he does it in Girl with Dragon Tattoo, but before that, it's more of this like Hitchcock type unnerving with the camera, and it's more what is entering and leaving the scene rather than like the camera has to follow you every. Not to say he doesn't use movement, but I would say that's not his trick.
Yeah,
that's not his thing. That is the fundamental. Like his is very much defined by mood. You know, how dark it is, you know what I mean? And even for something like this, he dialed down on those dark visuals, even though it's not like a super macabre, movie like Seven or like Fight Club.
But I like the other thing I really like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is just when he leaves the bar and goes back to the Kirkland house at the beginning over the opening credits and
the montage.
And the music kicks in, but like
that's all stolen shots. All that whole like of him walking back from the bar to his dorm, those are all stolen shots.
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite sequences in the movie.
What do you mean? Like they didn't shut the location down? Or?
No, they fucking stuck a camera up. They had there's a story where they had to light up an archway, so they got like they I don't know if they hired a street performer or they got somebody to pose as a street performer with like a light on their belt, and like went behind the archway to like light it up. And then he that's like the archway he walks by.
And so that was a splinter unit, and nobody knew was
dude. It was like there? It was like them. Yeah, it was like eyes. Like all those people in the background are students at Harvard.
Now I have a big question: are those the only shots that are actually taken at Harvard?
No.
Where was the location?
I'm not sure the location.
It wasn't shot.
It wasn't shot at like the
so
dorms
they just
and stuff.
Stole them.
They just stole all those shots of him walking around.
But
yeah,
but also
the locations person in me, my brain melts. The indie filmmaker in me, have a hard on.
Well, this is another one of those examples where like we're in, and just FYI, we all met each other in film school, which should be evident, and I apologize for that. It's it's one of those things where the film school, they're like, oh man, when you get out into the industry, this none of this hack stuff. You're gonna be, man, you gotta have your shit together, and there's gonna be adults there, and like you gotta. You don't know you got to do it the right way, and then they're doing this stuff. They're like, we hired a street performer with a belt.
Yeah, so I also like I know like this movie had, in my opinion, like it seems like there was a really minimalist approach to the cinematography. Like I know that pretty much every setup was their mentality was like, can this be done in 20 minutes? So it's like they have like a kino flow, like augmenting a practical.
You need to do that when you're taking 90 takes of a guy rocking up and down the stairs.
Yeah, or like they'll have like one. Like kino flow above a table, and then like just like have it's like all practicals, and I know like it shows, right? Like it feels just super natural. Yeah. I love that. That's my favorite.
And you made that point in the beginning, and it was and it's a really good one. It's that Gordon Willis school of lighting. You know what I mean? Where you're not over lighting. You're adding a minimal amount of lights to get.
You're not painting the frame. You're trying to make it look natural.
Yeah, it's like the antithesis to like the old Hollywood like 3-point lighting.
Yeah, we're making pictures here.
The other thing that I liked about that scene in particular, and we'll probably talk about it later, but when the score kicks in during that part, it sets the tone for the rest of the movie. Just with him walking to where he's got to go, and then the music kind of kicks in, and then you're like, okay, it's got like a more serious kind of tone to it, but. Yeah,
let's talk about
it. It kind of gives you the impression that something also big is about to go down as well, weirdly, with it, even though it also kind of reflects his state of mind at the beginning with the subtle sort of piano that kind of kicks in over top of the score.
Everything kind of just bleeds really well together in this, and I think the best movies have that synchronicity and harmony between things like score and visuals, and the mood of the music is matching the mood of the imagery. And I think this might be a good time to discuss the soundtrack. I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, so already I'm like, I hear Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and I'm like, all right, take my money. Now, I think it's the most modern soundtrack, especially at that time, that's been put together, where it's really looking at classical dynamics and the idea of emotion, single piano strokes, but then getting into that distorted technical, it's like it's washed with that like electronic, electrical, technological sound.
It's like a digital
and
like orchestra. That's where he went with that. Like, if you're watching like a whole, story told by an orchestra, they'll have those like low parts where it's just rumbling, incoherent sounds and whatever. And he did that, except for he did it all like with weird digital noises, and it's the most Trent Reznor thing ever. And it's also just worked.
Like the score sticks out like a sore thumb. It's something from the movie that you take away from it afterwards. Like, I definitely downloaded the score as soon as I heard it. I was like, this score is incredible.
If you're a Nails fan, if you are a Nine Inch Nails fan, it is like on the money. Like, it's a little on the nose, which made me love it more. But I could see if you weren't a Nine Inch Nails fan, then it might have been a little too much. But
part of the music, I kind of dealt with part of my misgivings going when I heard like they're doing a movie about the creation of Facebook, is we're gonna have scenes of guys coding, and I felt that a lot of that was dealt with well, visually, but also the music just makes everything they seem more epic. Like the guy writes some blog posts, an equation gets written on a window, and it's like, wow, they're doing shit. It's like, these guys, what am I doing? And to be very honest with you, I listen to that soundtrack while doing work because it makes everything I do seem more epic.
Can we give a shout out to that scene though, when they're like, you're thinking, they're gonna have shots of guys coding, but then they are taking shots while coding. That scene is great because you wonder how are those people?
So well
I wasn't
together.
part of that subculture when I was in school. Yeah. What were they partying and doing? And it's like, I don't know. Seems legit to me. It's hilarious.
It's so well put together.
I love the regatta scene. And I watched the movie last night again, and I completely forgot about that scene. And the music in that scene, like the tilt shift, like the way it's edited, like I know that's a classical song, but is that like redone by?
So Trent Reznor talks about this that was the hardest thing he had to do, because like he didn't want it to seem hokey, because he's like, if this is in the scene, it's going to seem ridiculous, and they were very specific about wanting to use that song. So he spent so much time playing with it. And he said this was really the only way we could put it together, where they add those electronic elements to kind of make it in line with the rest of the score, but also maintain the classical thing, which is meant to go with that old Oxford European rowing situation, And I thought he did with that well, but he said that was by far the toughest part of the soundtrack.
I just remember watching that and just I completely forgot about it, and it just hit me, and I was like, wow, this is such a cool scene. Like, it's almost not even necessary.
The
you know what I
margin
mean?
for error, like they in an otherwise not very, like, the stylistic, like that's the part that sticks out, right? Like, it's like this weird, like almost not from the movie part, and the margin
like
for
a dream
error
sequence or something.
It would have been as random as a dream sequence in it, but somehow they pulled it off. Like, everybody involved on the team just nailed that, and it's like, even when it starts, you're just like, oh, this is different from everything I've seen so far, and then you forget about it by the end of the scene. And even flirting with like how obvious that is, that they lose the race or whatever, but yet it's not cheesy or hokey at all. Like, that's
I thought it was, and like, we talk about, in other podcasts, cinematographers being engineering whizzes, but Trent Reznor is that on the musical side. Like, they were fucking with sequencers, inventing different, sequencers and different, ways of modulating sound to get those like distorted, like high feedback noises. You know what I mean? Like, there's this one track I would say everyone to listen to. If you haven't downloaded the soundtrack, download the soundtrack. It's called Intriguing Possibilities. And they use this really high guitar frequency. It sounds like a guitar feedback, and they just loop it and just with compression and delay, it just sounds so good. And this is him at his trade, working at the highest level, and they won the Oscar for it. And that there's sometimes the Oscars get it wrong. The scores, they generally, the good ones.
3-6 Mafia.
We're
Oscar
giving all the
3-6
love.
Mafia.
Huge.
As Trent Reznor fans, we're giving all the love to him. What did Atticus Ross? Do you
Who
know
is
how
Atticus
their
Ross?
division?
Atticus
who is he?
Ross.
What is their division of work?
Atticus Ross has been a producer and engineer for Nine Inch Nails.
Okay.
Right, and he's his primary composing collaborator.
Okay, so it wasn't they didn't be like, hey Trent, you're kind of new. We're gonna stick you up with a
Yeah,
a
I mean, in the Trent
composer.
Reznor, in the Trent Reznor kind of, and the Nine Inch Nails thing. I mean, there's you people like Flood, Alan Moulder, right, and then Atticus Ross is another one in a little bit of the later Nine Inch Nails stuff. But like with this, they really started like working on things like Ghosts and like records like that, where it was more heavily involved in creating an electronic soundscape. So you're looking at like you're basically taking Nine Inch Nails work and adding like a heavy Brian Eno type type influence, and that's right up Atticus Ross's thing. He's a proficient engineer, proficient producer. He really understands how to get the most, and part of that technical innovation, he is a massive part of that in terms of bringing that in, because he understands this studio. If you want to compose anything electronically, you really have to understand what the studio is and what it's capable of and how it itself can be used, as an instrument. And that's the beauty of their
dynamic,
collaboration.
their
Is that
teamwork.
he kind of has the ideas, and Atticus Ross really helps him bring that out, and that has led to their composing. You know what I mean? Like you're watching Vietnam right now, and like that, those are old tracks that are taken from some Nine Inch Nails stuff, some stuff from this soundtrack, and it's good. And he's like they're the premier group now for putting together scores. Like people are all over them to do this stuff. I mean, they did The Watchmen. The Watchmen was incredible.
I love watching like some of your favorite artists, people, personalities, like their careers evolve. Like when somebody kind of finds this second career after music and selling records and stuff, like usually you probably go to TV or nothing. And then this is like an art driven musical thing that is just a natural extension for him, and he'll probably be doing for the rest of his career.
Yeah. So we got to move on, gentlemen. What I would like to talk about now is the performances. Jesse Eisenberg
kills it.
I think he's fantastic.
I'm not even a really big fan of him, and he nailed it.
I'm not a huge fan of him either, and I thought he was great. And him and Andrew Garfield are so good. The venom, he's a nasty bastard. He's, the venom he spews.
Oh, he's always putting him down. He's always putting Eduardo down.
And, like the amount of jealousy, and they really, really bring home those ideas I talked about at the beginning of betrayal, of jealousy, of class, and how, and not sharing in another person's success, and and using that as something to devalue yourself. And he does that, and that really, and as I said from the opening scene, like you see that from the beginning, his inadequacies start showing.
Yeah, like how Andrew Garfield handles the parts where he's welling up, like it's through those depositions and stuff. He's getting progressively more intense, like as the story goes on, and more emotional. And when he's kind of like choking up, the way it's like almost like he's like afraid to even talk to him. He feels so betrayed, and it's like you feel it. It's just in your guts.
You know what I thought was so cool about his character was, by the end of the movie, other than the fact that we're vaguely aware he like made money on oil futures and like he has a father, we don't know anything about Wardo. Like he has a girlfriend. Like that's because it's from Zuckerberg's perspective, right? He doesn't give a fuck about Wardo.
Yes, that's
so
that's
he doesn't know anything about him. So like you see him go through this, his arc, which is amazing. But like you really don't know much about him because Zuckerberg genuinely, like every like conversation they have, he's like, I need this. I need this Linux box.
How are you? Yeah.
I need this Linux box. I need this, extra $1,000. I need this. I need that. You know what I mean? So you don't know anything about Wardo because.
Do you think that was exaggerated? That like are there rumors that he literally did not have almost any friends at all? And like
again, I have
no
no idea what the true story is.
I just want to know.
I can't confirm that. I'm wondering how much if they were able to access any transcripts for the deposition parts. That I'm not sure about.
I thought Andrew Garfield stole the movie for me personally.
The scene where
he
he
was
signs,
incredible.
when he finds out from the lawyers
That's the scene
that his,
That
you know,
really-
all his shares have been diluted to 0.03%, and he comes out and he's like, he can't talk to you, he's wired in, and we'll get to Timberlake in a second.
That's another.
He walks.
The way he walks, if you look
Yeah.
at the way he walks in the beginning scene, think about him at the Caribbean party, how he
Yeah.
walks in the Caribbean party. Yeah. And then he like walks over, and then like how he's like walks, like strides out. You got that low angle as you're
and
pulling
like
back with him.
grabs that laptop in one fell movement and just smashes it. And then
Gangster.
and he just, the venom he finally spits back at him and JT's character, and we'll get into JT right in a second, because I think that Andrew Garfield is good. JT is also
he's so good.
is incredible in it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into it now. He's the Iago. He's the guy who from Othello. He's the guy who is in.
Lion King?
Pardon me?
Sorry, Aladdin? Lion King?
No, not that Iago.
Iago?
No, from Shakespeare.
I know,
It's not even spelled.
It was a bad joke that I fucked up.
No, it's amazing because I'm like,
And then we just jumped all over.
No, because
just hung him out to dry.
because I would say
Lion King?
the Lion King. It's not even the Lion. This guy's got the character and the movie wrong.
Yo, Emperor's New Groove?
Okay, sorry. Okay, we
but like
digress.
he's got that, but of him coming in here, and the opening scene where not the one with, sorry, my apologies, not the opening scene where we see Sean Parker, but the one where he's at the table with them, and it's like this tour de force, and he's like holding court almost, and he has that level of arrogance.
Fantastic
I mean,
scene.
okay, let's think about it here. Like if you told me, Kyle Bodanis, when you're 17 years old, you're gonna think JT is kind of awesome, I'd be like, who are you talking about? Fuck this. Bye.
All millennials
motherfucker.
have been through this journey where like this guy started from NSYNC, and we were at a bad age for like
The jean tuxedo?
just having no interest in that, like actually just spite for that.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, this guy with the Mr. Noodle hair is like just killing it in Hollywood. It's
Dude,
it's wild.
He's
amazing.
Amazing.
He's amazing.
I think he's
You can't say
probably
anything.
not a
There's-
general, but I mean, we get to whether or not we think he's a piece of shit, but I think he's probably in real life pretty okay.
I think I don't. How would I know? But I think
he was good
great
in the
guy.
movie. I don't know. I thought he was probably the weakest actor out of everybody.
But he filled his shoes in the
No,
movie
he's-
quite
yeah,
well.
okay,
for
yeah.
what
For what the character is?
And you're also
for that
comparing
character?
against some really, really
I-
talented
I'm-
actors, right?
Fair,
So
fair. I'm just
really
throwing my 2
talented
cents
people.
in. I thought he was.
I thought he was good, and he was, he really, you want to punch him in the fucking face.
Oh yeah,
Drop the. Just Facebook.
but it's true
It's
though.
cleaner. I know exactly, but
That's
it's true though.
That's what
I know.
That's,
That's
what
what
I'm mad
the way
about.
he says it, you want to bash him with a chair.
The self-satisfaction he has is cleaner. It's like it's just
Yeah, no,
it's
so that
good.
yeah,
You know what's
Right,
really
and also
cool?
he's not a super. I mean, unless you count like some Mickey Mouse Club stuff and maybe Alpha Dog, which I can't remember when it came out.
Oh.
Like he's not a super experienced actor.
He was in Popstar. Well, that was afterwards.
right from the
Yeah.
get-go in Alpha Dog though. That was the one when I started thinking of JT.
He can act.
Legit, he can act.
Yeah, he can act 100%. He's a talented guy, and I thought like again like
And the SNL skits.
he really
Some of the best.
You,
Some of the best SNL skits.
yeah.
Of,
Period.
yeah.
he,
Period.
He really, that character really gets between them, right? He really gets between them, really gets in Zuckerberg's ear and is like, this guy's fucking you over. This guy isn't the guy. And meanwhile, this guy is literally one of the only people who supported him. And, Sean Parker is just using, Mark Zuckerberg as a conduit for his own fame and his own, recognition, money.
You mean Wardo?
But
He's using.
No,
Wardo.
and I'm saying,
Oh, Sean Parker.
yeah, sorry, yeah, I'm saying Sean Parker
My
is
apologies.
using Zuckerberg,
Zuckerberg.
whereas Eduardo Saverin is like, this is my brother.
Yeah.
And this is someone.
But at the end, and I really like that they did this, a lot of movies will retreat to some sort of sorrow for that, or that he made a mistake. He didn't. If he had listened to Wardo, they would have shot too soon,
Mm-hmm.
and it wouldn't have worked out. Like the moral is there. If you're thinking the end goal is money or creating this company, which was the goal, Sean Parker was right. So,
Well, I mean, they didn't know what the goal was, right? He's like, we don't
Yeah.
even know what it is yet, and it's like, even at that time, we didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like then it was like, when we saw that movie, we're like, it's a social network. Now it's like, oh, it's a information harvesting network. So at the time, so it rings differently watching it with today's lens than it does watching it you know.
I really liked watching this movie now.
Yeah.
What about
Versus
the-
I liked it in the first place, but I watched it yesterday again too, and just they really nailed it.
Yeah, I thought they were good. I thought the Winklevi were. I mean, Armie Hammer was fantastic. He didn't really, not until Birth of a Nation did he really have a part where he actually like was good. You know what I mean? Like he was in the Lone Ranger. I'm like, that's the thing, because like this movie was kind of, you know, like for him a launching point where he was good in it. You know, he got a lot of other roles for it, but I mean, not a whole lot of great roles until he got to Birth of a Nation, which was he was fantastic. He was fantastic in that movie.
What do we think about the CG for him? So
Oh.
like it held up pretty well.
I didn't notice it the first time I saw it. I didn't know who Armie Hammer
Oh, so
Hammer
that's why
was.
legit twins?
This was my.
This is the first time I ever saw him. in
I
anything.
did not. I figured that only because most twin situations, it's usually like they do coverage for it and all that kind of stuff. This was my first initiation to this gentleman. And I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, he was great. He was fantastic. Who was the guy that did the body double for the other guy? We probably don't know.
I can't remember.
Okay, but yeah, he was great as the Winklevi. That was definitely a highlight. Like those two, and like they're twins, but they were still very much like separate characters.
The
Like
guy's
that's
Josh Pence was
Josh Pence,
the
okay.
gentleman's name that was the
was the
double.
stand-in. Yeah.
Now, obviously, Facebook hasn't aged well. I think that is pretty certain here. Like, how are we viewing this film now, given all the Facebook drama that's unfolded? You know, Mark Zuckerberg being the Darth Vader of privacy. Like what do we think? Like that's kind of one thing I loved watching this again, because I hadn't watched it since that whole Mark Zuckerberg trial, Cambridge Analytica thing.
Oh, that was still pretty recently. That was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
10 months ago.
Well, I feel like I've watched this movie so many times that it's kind of a big gap.
Mhm.
But you look at it completely different now. Like the elements where you're really evaluating what this thing he made
Mm-hmm.
and its impact on us, you start to really reevaluate it, and it paints him differently. I think
Absolutely. Well, like I said
like
before,
the character that is.
they said like we don't even know what it is yet, and it's like they didn't know now. Like they didn't know then. They didn't know when the movie came out. It's like,
But we do now.
Well, I mean, who even knows? Like,
Yeah,
who,
really.
how much deeper does it go?
Yeah,
what
right.
I
What
mean?
happens when? Yeah, what happens in like 3 years from now when Facebook somehow gets like merged and purges all their assets, which is
And then it's
all
the
of our
internet.
personal information.
Yeah, the internet
And
brought
then-
to you by Facebook,
Yeah.
or like you have the
I don't know.
internet brought to you by Google, or they're like service providers. So it's like, okay, instead of like you're going to ABC or whatever before ABC, your service provider is Facebook. So you're watching everything that Facebook wants you to see, or Google, whatever. Your browser, your search engine, your social media, all of that is curated by Facebook. All that, whatever, Google, it doesn't matter. So it's like,
It adds an extra level to his venom too,
Mm.
right? You're seeing a guy who, like, now I'm like, is he a sociopath?
absolutely.
Right? Like,
Have you seen him drink water?
What's with that hair? You got billions.
I feel
hold
like
on, hold on.
all
I wanna-
rich people have terrible hair.
That's true.
That's not a broad statement at all.
That was another.
You're not rich though.
I think
You're
that
okay.
was kind of another big strength in the movie is that we didn't know, they didn't know in real life, people didn't know what Facebook was or what it was going to be, but every character knew how important it was. And they put that in really good. Like everybody, from the second anybody heard about it, and that was real, right? Like there was a frenzy around it, and it turned out the hype was like 100% justified.
Yeah.
Anybody that could clamor on or whatever, be part of that idea wanted to, and now it's
It was massive. I remember, like, we all were there. We were all young adults when Facebook hit. Like, what? We were 18?
Yeah.
Something like that, 17,
This
18?
is why I loved it. It's like that
19?
you saw that history kind of unfolding in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like the movie kind of contextualized it because the movie was super modern, super getting into like the zeitgeist of, of culture. And it's the meaning as we've been watching that history unfold is now completely changed from here's this guy who, despite being, kind of a morally reprehensible dickhead, created this thing that changes the way we interact with one another. It gave birth to other social media, which then has blown up, and the whole concept of social media, sharing your life, sharing your pictures, all that kind of stuff. And now it's like that's also the thing that mines your data, allows fake, the whole fake
Tracks
news,
you.
tracks you. You know what I mean? Selling your metadata to
Yeah, sorry, you said also fake news, exactly.
Yeah, to the NSA, to different companies, advertisers.
You can pay for it
groups.
to be, I mean, you can essentially just pay for it, like targeted ads, and use it as like your propaganda wing, no matter like who you are. You know what I mean? You can just like pay money, and now that's your propaganda wing to super hyper targeted people that are susceptible, and are like can be, for lack of a better word, tricked by shitty news articles that aren't getting fact checked or anything.
And the stuff at the beginning of it, when they're talking to you're seeing the blatant douchebaggery of them rating women compared to farm animals, taking other people's privacy. Like, the people who are involved were super upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries to be like, this is not what I'm all about. But in the end, when we looked at it, it's actually this lack of privacy, depriving people of privacy. Although maybe I was going to say lacking that, having a little bit more class than that, but it's classless, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And now it's just fulfilled kind of what the opening scenes of the movie initially said about.
I think just it's a movie for the times, especially, and sort of where the future is kind of going. And I think in that respect, it's certainly a movie for the decade because of that main reason, but also just back to the whole culture thing about sharing pictures and stuff like that. Edward Snowden talked about stuff like that at the NSA. Just people's pictures were getting passed around, and there was just that kind of a culture associated with those privacy related matters.
And before that, that was like a.
And so just to further emphasize that it's a movie for the times, and that it's kind of it's just reflective of this last decade, especially.
Yeah, I mean, like before that, like you were saying, the people sharing like at the NSA, and like that was like a crackpot conspiracy theory. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like the government's tracking us through social media, and then it's like, oh shit, they are, and everybody's kind of like, oh, okay.
This is not a conspiracy theory. This is reality. I mean, I just finished Edward Snowden's book, and he singles out Facebook as one of as one of the worst, the worst offenders for it. I mean, other than like Amazon, he mentions and all that, but
Google.
Yeah, Google. I mean, he runs the gamut of all the people, but he specifically mentions Mark Zuckerberg, and like there's that whole thing where he gets the business cards where he's like, "I'm CEO, bitch," and how the adults, that idea of adults taking the company from him and not letting that happen, that Sean Parker crams down his fucking throat. But maybe an adult should have taken control of something that wielded that much power.
Maybe they did though.
No, he brought on.
Yep.
Nah, he's been okay. Well, you know what though? I'm gonna let's entertain the idea because at the end of the day, you have investors, right? So the ability to mine that data and distribute it is their biggest way of making money. So perhaps you're correct that there was because we don't know if there was shareholder push to make that happen. But at the end of the day,
it's like Zuckerberg, the big brains behind this whole data mining operation.
Actually, that's an interesting question. So is that the case?
I
would definitely put some blame on Sheryl Sandberg as well, because she was kind of supposed to be the adult in the room, and then that happened, and maybe they felt that was brewing. That's why they brought her on. Obviously, she's a super talent in the business world and the tech world, but I mean, we've seen it go off the rails, and after I watched the movie again, I watched on YouTube like the Zuckerberg congressional hearing stuff, and it's almost like because at the end of the movie they're like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg is worth this, and these are what these people did. It's like that should have just been like one of the final, like if you could tack that on the current.
Oh, there should just be a sequel. I was watching the movie yesterday thinking I would love a sequel to this movie, just a straight up sequel. Like same actors,
because you could
whatever.
You could. It would be one of those situations where you and me were talking about The Godfather. Godfather 2 is almost like a completely different movie.
Yeah.
That would be a case where that would be kind of like that, where you're looking at the data mining and how that is. Cambridge Analytica,
Cambridge, exactly.
Right? Yeah, you know what I mean. And
but I think this is one of those movies that could outlive the actual platform because of how good the movie is. Like it has that kind of a feel like to it, I guess, if that makes sense.
I feel like there's just always going to be some sort of
there'll be a version of it.
Facebook.
There'll be a version of it, maybe not.
Well, now the genie's
the
out of the
exact
bottle.
same thing. Yeah, well now
Can't put it back in.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, guys, we got to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for discussing my favorite movie, the 2010s. We will be continuing this. We'll make that announcement coming up on social media about which movie is going to be next. But thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, guys, that's the podcast for this week. Thanks for listening in. If you have questions, comments, or just want to fact check, reach out to us on social media. And if you like what you heard or just want to watch dope videos, go to our YouTube channel and ring that subscriber bell. See you soon.